Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for Shaping the Endless Frontier. Hi, I'm Tom Still from the Wisconsin Technology Council, and I'll be your moderator for today. And the Tech Council is one of the partners in this Shaping the Endless Frontier series, which is two parts, at least initially, beginning today. And I want to thank the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, otherwise known as WARF, the UW-Milwaukee, and Michael Best Strategies for being a part of the team to help put this together. And we'll get to some introductions in a minute, but first, what's this series all about? I don't think there's any need to remind anyone that we live in uncertain times. Yet, it's also a time of opportunity and rebuilding, I think especially in Wisconsin and the upper Midwest. And I think everyone in this partnership believes the region has the resources, the talent, the R&D capacity, and the industrial might to be a major contributor in the nation's economic recovery. When we think about this region, in my mind, it stretches from Chicago through Milwaukee, through Madison, and up into the Twin Cities. I've called it in the past the IQ corridor, with the I standing for ideas, intellectual property, investment, and the Q for quality, the kind of quality that we're all accustomed to in this region. And one vehicle for moving this ahead is in Congress right now, pending. It's called the Endless Frontier Act. And it has bipartisan sponsorship, including a lead sponsor from Wisconsin. So just some quick logistics for today. Use the chat function to submit questions as we go along, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. Some we might group because they may have common themes. And we'll also hear from two panelists who have some really informed takes on the subject. Briefly introduce him now: Erik Iverson, the CEO of WARF, and Ruben, who runs the Urban League of Greater Madison. Well, we're going to start by hearing from someone who has lectured and written on the subject of the Midwest Renaissance for years, John Austin. John's a lecturer at the University of Michigan. He's a fellow at the Chicago Council for Global Affairs, a fellow at the Brookings Institution, which is two groups that have been instrumental in the discussion around this and some of the brainpower behind the Endless Frontier Act. He's led the Michigan Economic Center. He's the former head of the Michigan State School Board. And he recently spoke in Wisconsin back last fall to a meeting of investors and others about the economic potential of the upper Midwest. And John, you have more hats than a haberdasher. So we're great here to have you on board, and take it away. Welcome, John.
Yeah, my wife would say, she heard that introduction, fewer titles, more income, please. But I'm privileged to be here and join you and join Ruben and Erik. And while I can't see all of you out there, I saw the list of people. Pretty powerful and impressive group of heavy hitters from the region. So I hope I'll deliver something that's worthy of your attention. It's interesting. Our region is certainly the center of attention, both politically, but historically, it's been kind of center of interest about our economy and its transition. And that really came forward after the 2016 election, where Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania played such a key role and did kind of resuscitate a national and international interest in what is this Rust Belt, and who are these workers who are anxious, and is it a place of empty factory towns? And as we know, that's not the story of this region. So what I'm going to share with you is this true story of how this region has evolved and can continue to be evolved, and can really become the center of innovation in the coming economy and in emerging sectors for our nation, and really lead the way, just as it did in the 20th century, kind of led our nation's industrial might and agricultural might. And we can shape that in a post-COVID world, which I'll talk about implications of COVID and the overdue attention to race on our economy, and just the attention that we need to take to the bridging of economic opportunity gaps by race that are profound in our region. So the context for this is the Vital Midwest report, which came out in February, right before the pandemic hit, was really a rework and an update from the 2006 work with Brookings, the Vital Center, which really was the first time to take a comprehensive look at the economic development storyline of this agro-industrial Midwest heartland. We called it the Great Lakes because that was a positive title versus Rust Belt. The Chicago Council on Global Affairs was very active as a partner in that, and was Dick Longworth, a senior fellow, wrote his own book, Caught in the Middle, about the evolution and the struggles really of the industrial community heartland at the same time. And that report, The Vital Center in 2006, it really was the first hard look at the economy of this region. And it also found this region, not surprising to folks tuning in, as a disproportionate share of the nation's talent generation in all disciplines, really kicks above its weight in innovation and new technologies and new intellectual property. And how do we do better at translating all that talent generation and innovation into new jobs and businesses here versus letting them flee to the coast? And we proposed at that time, the next president, whoever it would be, if this was in 2006 or 7, they should fund federal research and development dollars, not through Cold War labs to find new plutonium uses, but through research university hub innovation institutes. Because then we would naturally compete and win at University of Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio State. And that's actually what happened. Obama did some of that. Energy innovation hubs, manufacturing innovation institutes were funded, and we're doing that work. We also said we need to pour more resources, early stage venture capital, and help it find the innovations that are coming out of our universities and our companies. And so we need more state funds and innovation support systems. And but that happened as many states and others developed innovation funds or ways to grow the ecosystem of early stage and venture capital in the region, and it paid off at the time. We're always answering the question, why would anybody care about this region? Some of us care about it because we live here. We want to see our region thrive anew and be a place that our young people stay, and that is the driver of good economic opportunity for more people. We do have this unique economic development storyline in the region, and I'm talking about kind of a 12-state, part to 12 states, from the upper Mississippi to the Ohio River watershed to the communities that surround the Great Lakes. Was the center of agro-industrial development in the last century, and we want to see it, it plays certainly a disproportionate role in our nation's politics, as well as the economy. We are the swing states, now more than ever. People are interested in this region as there's been growing concern, and part of the frontier proposals came out of this attention to, can we fuel economic growth in the non-coastal, hothouses? And we even see within our region, how do we spread economic opportunity to more of the people and places that aren't already thriving and have turned a corner? The Madisons and the Ann Arbors are doing great. What about the other communities where they've lost their anchor employer? So there's been a lot of interest in how to nurture economic growth and development in more people and places. Now we see the unique opportunities and challenges to our region, given who we are and how we developed by pandemic and the implications for reshaping the economy, and the finally, long overdue attention to bridging gaps of opportunity based on race. We do have the most segregated city regions in the country, and that's a big challenge for us. This region developed, it was the frontier way back when. I had amazing natural resources, the richest farmland on earth, the ores and the timbers, and folks flooded in here in the 1800s to begin to exploit those resources in abundance. And we then inspired tinkerers and entrepreneurs, made amazing discoveries and drove tremendous innovation that really created the industries that powered America for the 20th century. All the industries that grew and thrived and were part of the industrial and agro-industrial revolution: the auto industry, the aviation industry, the oil industry, consumer durables, the washing machine, the retail sales and catalogs, the electronics industry. All of those grew and thrived here, created great wealth, created good jobs. Folks flooded in from the South, from Appalachia, where I grew up, from around the world to work in the machine shops and the mills and the factories. But as you know, that globalization and new competitors drove the restructuring of our agro and manufacturing base. We're in this transition from this reality, which was us, from an industrial powerhouse to what today is emerging across the region as a tech belt. We've seen, over the last 20 years, things have evolved rapidly in this region. So many Midwestern communities have shed their, kind of agro and factory economy skins and are thriving, or were before the pandemic, in a different tech-driven, knowledge-driven global economy. Most of the major metros, from Minneapolis, St. Paul in the west, which long ago, shed its identity as the flour milling capital of the world, to Pittsburgh in the east, which rebounded famously from the collapse of its signature steel industry, and now is thriving anew. And in a urbanized economy, which may change a little bit now, the major metros are where the economic action has been and has been growing. And most of our major metros, Cleveland and Detroit, a little slower, have turned the corner. Certainly, all these university towns and college towns, which we have more than any place really in the country or on the planet, those communities are kicking it. It's almost tautological in a knowledge economy. New businesses, new ideas, talent congregates, and so from Iowa City to State College, these communities are thriving in a changed world. The really interesting story, and we chronicle a lot of it and give a lot of good examples in the Vital Midwest report, is whether the small and medium-sized factory towns that may have lost their anchor, or where their anchor employers, have managed to stay on the cutting edge of innovation. What's their success path? And there are various different ones, from Grand Rapids, which has diversified from being the furniture capital, to Decorah, Iowa, a small town that's a destination for foodies. For Columbus, Indiana, where the anchor employer, Cummins Engine, just stayed on the global cutting edge of clean energy innovation and innovation in the community through leading edge architecture. And it's a thriving smaller city. And we've got more of the smaller factory and communities than any place, given how our economy developed. The story of Minneapolis. It began to evolve earlier than most of our other industrial communities, and it's very diverse and a very attractive place, despite being the focus of this Floyd movement, meaning the unfortunate incident there. Still, they are actually more organized as a community to try to attend to gaps of opportunity by color, by race, and that's a big challenge for all of us moving ahead. Milwaukee, the story. How does Milwaukee's leaders 20 years ago begin to say, what can we develop a rebrand from our machine tool, Harley Davidson, beer capital? And as you know, the business and civic and political leaders said, maybe water is our identity. We've got water technology firms. We can expand our water research and learning activity. We're on a beautiful waterfront location with the cleaned up Milwaukee River and a beautiful Lake Michigan waterfront. And it's worked. It's helped Milwaukee emerge as a global water innovation center. And that's fantastic. And that's just an example of the path of many communities. But we need to do more, and we certainly need to do more to lift and help communities that haven't turned the corner. There really are, I've written about, it's a tale of two Rust Belts, a tale of two Midwests. There are for every Pittsburgh that's, turned the corner and is a talent magnet and thriving with AI and robotics and medical and a beautiful river city or riverfront location. There's a Janesville which lost its anchor. Now I understand Janesville's coming back, but the reality of these pictures is true for every Ann Arbor, where that's the Google headquarters in Ann Arbor. Of course, Google's got to be here because there's lots of people, talent that wants to live and work, and there's lots of innovation and new ideas coming out of University of Michigan. My neighbor moved from New York City with his wife to work for Google. He never had a house, never had a lawnmower. He loves the quality of life in a place like Ann Arbor. It's amazing. And you can play the coastal elites can still play in the global economy and be coastal elite, but they can enjoy the beautiful quality of life. But there's a Sharon, Pennsylvania that is part of that steel country, river, Youngstown and other communities, which lost it all and has never really come back. So then as in now, there's tremendous interest in how, back when we first did this work and when we updated it, what's the story of this region? How can we accelerate the economic transition for people and places with kind of an imperfect transition? Many communities and many people turned the corner, but others who are, increasingly being left behind. There's a lot at stake in accelerating this transition in communities that have turned the corner, where people have some optimism. They're not worried about paycheck to paycheck. They're not angry because their community isn't what it used to be. Folks aren't as susceptible to the kind of economic nostalgia to bring back the industries and the jobs of the past, and the kind of resentment or intolerance, somehow eager to blame immigrants or people of color for your economic woes. Folks are thoughtful, meaning they have some ability, psychic space to not be as anxious and angry over their future and respond to those kinds of appeals. So that's another reason to accelerate economic change in the region, where there are many people in communities who are anxious about change and where's their future, where's their kids' future. 12 years ago, when we first mapped kind of the economy and the metrics here, we found that this region, and these are from the 12 states that I described lining the Mississippi, Ohio River, and the Great Lakes. Lots of innovation, lots of talent generation, but we had a brain drain. Too many of those well-educated people leave us. We were seeing our new ideas and technologies leave as well and get incubated or commercialized elsewhere. Or even our wealth, our amazing wealth that was generated in our companies and our philanthropies and our pension fund. We invented the pension fund. You did it in Wisconsin, but those dollars leave. So look at the metrics, which usually translate into new innovation or new startups, new businesses. Third of the nation's, IP and R&D, but we, if anything, were subsidizing the innovation and commercialization of new business startups on the coast. At that time, of all the money that pension funds put into venture capital, half of that money was coming from our region's pension funds, but it was largely going to coastal venture capital. While only 12% at that time of the nation's venture capital then found its way back to support commercialization and business development in our region. So a big part of the agenda that we were working on. So as we look at this picture today, what is our innovation infrastructure? How can we lever it for driving new business and job growth in the region? We've got lots of challenges that are unique to us given the way we developed. I'm not going to spend any time on those today. I'm going to talk about the amazing innovation assets and how we can leverage them with federal help and with your all's hard work. We do have the most racially segregated cities. We do have an undereducated workforce, too many folks with a high school diploma. We do have some of the nation's most aging and expensive repair infrastructure. But we also have still global companies. 150 of the Fortune 500 are headquartered here. They play in the world. They're a font of a lot of innovation themselves. Probably our greatest economic asset is this network unrivaled of leading top research universities and teaching institutions. 20 plus of the world's top 200 global universities are in this region. You all know that the emerging sectors, whether it's IT or bioscience or energy, come from the interplay of universities and the private sector and the spin-offs and the new business startups that grow out of them. The West Coast only has 13 of these institutions, the East Coast 15, Europe, China, nobody has this. These are from the 9 states, the figures on the right. We still kick out a healthy share of the nation's R&D new patents in this region, which should be the source of new jobs, businesses in growth sectors. We're still a huge talent generator. I mean, our institutions are just bigger and badder than those on the coast. And we have amazing network of medical research complexes. When the medical industrial complex emerges from these research and teaching hospital centers. We've kicked out a disproportionate share of the nation's, just from 9 states, STEM graduates. That doesn't even, count all the MBAs or the educators that we produce here. So a huge share of the nation's talent is here. And in the last 10 years, we reversed the brain drain. After decades of a lot of those graduates, a lot of those well-educated people leaving us for greener pastures or the coast, we now have a brain gain again in the region, which is exciting and something that's just been vivid or evident in the last 10 years. We do have the horsepower to be a leader in all these emerging sectors. This is where the world needs solutions today, in water, in clean energy, in new food systems, in new mobility systems. That's the work of today and tomorrow, just as we were the innovators in providing food for the world and providing consumer goods for the world in the last century. This is where the action is. These are growth sectors, and this is where we're already playing at scale. And we have the institutions, the innovation base, the production base, the R&D base to seize these global multi-trillion-dollar markets. Another asset which is amazing is this beautiful piece of geography with farms and woods and water. When the rest of the world and climate change are creating droughts and fires and hurricanes, relatively speaking, we're a climate friendly region. We've got challenges of creating floods and things, and we have to redo our infrastructure. But any place that's got these natural assets and all the fresh water you could want, and has woods and water, is a beautiful place to live and work and play. And as we're one of the few regions on Earth that can actually, in the long run, accommodate more population and business growth, which is good, and we should welcome it as long as we take good care of these natural assets, which we abuse, but now we've cleaned up and makes a wonderful lifestyle in our region. COVID-19 and the long overdue seriousness, I hope, which will continue, about racial and social justice. It means new challenges for us, but also new opportunities for our Midwest economy. It's going to accelerate some of the forces of change that were already at work before the pandemic. We're going to see the need for more innovation and new products and services, remote delivery vehicles for medicine and testing and food. We're going to see more automation of warehouses and manufacturing facilities and human proofing of systems. We're going to see even more flexible work arrangements now that we're forced to learn how to do that, and distant remote activities, just like we're doing today. And talent, where talent chooses to live and work, will continue to be increasingly important. Where do folks want to do their thing from if they can do their thing in the world? I hope we're going to keep paying attention to the demands of stitching marginalized people, folks of color, into economic activity, and be serious about that. Our public and private sector leaders, I hope we're going to pay continued attention to the different needs of our more diverse communities. I hope we'll continue to try to understand, what do the young people want? What kind of work do they want to do? What kind of problems do they want to solve? How do they want to work? Those things are going to be even more important. And obviously, we're having this, what otherwise would be a summit meeting or conference, by this crazy Zoom format, which is all of a sudden, that's what we do. Now, the opportunities for us, I think, are several, and we're already beginning to realize them as attributes of place and lifestyle become even more important. We're already seeing some of this, like people, professionals choosing to live and work in a beautiful place on a great lake, a community, because they can run their business or do their thing from there. Now we're going to see interest, and we're already seeing some of it. Let's get out of these dense hothouse big cities that were where all the economic action is on the coast, and maybe live in a beautiful lifestyle community that is a little saner, maybe a little safer, a little more easily socially distanced. Certainly the coastal money is going to continue to be looking for innovations and new locations, and we have more of that activity than the rest of the country. We're going to see, I think, within our region, there manufacturing regions, like a lot of our Midwest, are hardest hit by the pandemic. More businesses shutter, more workers lose their job in production. And so there, I hope, going to be increased focus of place-based economic development, which is the point of the Emerging Frontier proposal. And we are going to rearrange our supply chains. We already are, so we're not relying on China for medical or pharmaceutical. And hopefully we'll be partnering with our allies like Canada and our friends around the world, so that we'll rework our supply and logistics chains for resiliency with our friends and allies who share our values, and we can create more good jobs in the process. Maybe these old industries, as people started making masks, or we were seeing with 3D printing, become sexy again. If we wire with broadband more of our rural and small towns, you know, they could have a renaissance as attractive places to live, where people participate in the world. I think people are already taking this pandemic moment to maybe reconfigure their sense of, how do I want to spend my time? How do I want to spend more time with my family? I kind of like this. Will my own health and the health of my family be a more important consideration than the rat race of getting ahead in business in one of the, you know, the coastal cities? So maybe that will favor us. Private public interest too, about we've got to bring jobs to people in poor communities. We've got to help them get transportation systems to get to the job safely, because they take public transportation. There'll be a lot of interest to try to bring the economy and bring people who don't participate in the economy to, you know, to meet each other if we're serious about overcoming race-based and gaps of opportunity. And we certainly have an unprecedented set of competencies in this region to move from idea, from new technology to new invention, to prototyping, to production at scale and distribution around the world. You look what happened in the pandemic. All of a sudden, our tightly wound auto industry and related supply chains start converting at scale to make masks and ventilators at, you know, tens and tens of thousands of them. And that's a set of abilities that not very many places on Earth have. Challenges, and I want to get through this so that time for questions. We've got unique challenges from automation and dislocation is going to accelerate. We're going to need massive retraining. We've got to connect the unconnected in our cities and in our rural areas, you know, or they won't be able to learn. We're going to have maybe huge fatal stresses on our public systems if state and localities have no tax base right now, or it's very diminished. And if we don't intervene and the feds don't intervene to help, we could see some huge collapse of some of our higher education institutions, our public education institutions. Infrastructure rebuild is tremendous. It's an opportunity if we extend the high-speed communication to more people. It's a challenge because we've got the most work to do in this region that are unique to us. The solutions that are proposed in this latest, in the federal legislation that Tom was discussing, that included some of the work of my colleagues at Brookings. One, you know, we got to up our federal R&D in science and technology. Look at how China is getting serious about that. We've got work to do to just raise that basic investment to higher levels as a share of our GDP. And those investments pay off, and we can win that work. Given the innovation base and research university base in particular that we have in this region. Proposing to support some innovation hubs. These are the communities identified by Brookings that have a high level of tech-driven activity already that would be potential targets for a university-centric font of money to support more innovation, more spillovers, a lot of interest in making sure that that's done in some way that doesn't just help the well-educated and rich get richer, but includes job training to help people who aren't naturally already equipped to take jobs in the tech economy to get the training and education they need, and to bridge some of those gaps of opportunity by geography and race. And we need to pour more resources in terms of early stage capital, venture capital, and help it find innovation and make money for investors You can see this was the piece we did a couple years ago of those 6 states, you know, the dollar value of venture capital deals as venture capital deals are getting bigger. And we want to create that explosive growth dynamic of startups. We get more startups, we get more millionaires who invest in new startups. That doesn't happen when the investors, even the ones that are looking for it now, can't work through trusted investment partners. And that's why we need more early stage and venture capital ecosystem growth, so that there are people who help people find good deals to make in our region. We know that when we put it all together, when we look at Milwaukee, we put our innovation smarts together with all these amazing place-based assets. I mean, our cities and towns have great bones, great history, great arts, culture. We've got a lot of money in our communities. We should put that money to work growing the innovation and polishing up, as many communities have, including Milwaukee. This is an example of, you know, I asked somebody, what's the best, I think it was your former Chamber of Commerce president, give me the best example of how you've, you know, redeveloped your downtown and the water. Because look at this clean up the Milwaukee River and look at what the long is. It's a beautiful place. And, you know, we've got communities with those kinds of bones all over the Midwest that are successfully putting their investments into place and into supporting the innovation of their communities. Grand Rapids is one example of a community that's so turned the corner, diversified its economy, redeveloped their downtown, reconnected to the river, has firms that are global sustainability leaders. Other communities from, you know, Pittsburgh to Kalamazoo, you know, lost its big anchors, just like so many of our small, medium-sized manufacturing communities. Went up, John, and bought by Pfizer, you know, 40,000 jobs lost, but they kept some of that talent to start new bioscience spin-offs. They redeveloped their downtown for livable, walkable. They subsidized Bell's brewery, which some of you maybe drank it, Two Hearted or an Oberon. But mainly they said, we're a community that our economic development strategy is talent. We're going to pay for a college education for every graduate of the Kalamazoo school system. And it worked. It reversed the outmigration of middle-class families, and businesses come to Kalamazoo and they have growing incomes and are thriving again. So it can be done. And the last slide and story is, you know, the upside ability and the ability to be the center of economic action again is real for us. Not every place, not every region has the innovation assets and the other assets that we have. When we released the first report, Ned Gramlich was University of Michigan provost, serious economist. Clinton appointed him to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. He's the only person that can tell Larry Summers what to do, because he's Larry Summers' mentor. So we had a big confab at Brookings in DC about releasing this first report on the Great Lakes economy. And I said, you know, Ned, can you come speak? Because, you know, no one will listen to John Austin, but they'll listen to Ned Gramlich. He was dying of leukemia. He says, I can't. I said, I need a sound bite. And so this is the quote he gave. I think it's still the best, most succinct, unlike my presentation here, description of the opportunity for our region. We could be the place that is the center of innovation in the coming things, and as a beautiful, environmentally sustainable, clean, I say clean, green, blue playground for our nation's people to live and work. It's really unrivaled, and our job is to make it so. Thanks for the opportunity to share that picture and that story. Hearing from Ruben and Erik, and
thank you.
Answer your question.
Thank you, John. That's a great sort of look at a reminder of where we came from as a region, but also a roadmap for where we might be able to go. And so I really appreciate what I almost characterize as your realistic optimism about the region and some of the things we can do. Well, by the way, you can read his report, A Vital Midwest, if you go to the Chicago Council for Global Affairs website. And I've written about some of John's work in my Inside Wisconsin columns, which you can find on the Tech Council website. So now we want to broaden this conversation out a little bit with, we're going to be joined by 2 panelists. Erik Iverson. Erik is the CEO of WARF. He was formerly with the Infectious Disease Research Institute and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he was pretty deeply involved in global health initiatives there and really helped set up what became their venture capital arm at the foundation. And he's also an attorney with a deep background in intellectual property, which you might imagine was somebody who's running WARF. So thank you, Erik. And I'll just quickly introduce Ruben, and then we'll go in that order for some comments. Ruben Anthony, he is president and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Madison. Um, he comes from a really diverse background and includes consulting and the construction industry and well beyond. He's done that in both the private and the public sector. He was a senior VP for an engineering firm, an administrator in the State Department of Transportation, where he was eventually deputy secretary. And if I recall, he's also pretty active in the Mount Zion Baptist Church in Madison. So thanks for being with us, Ruben. So let's have some thoughts from both Erik and Ruben, and then we'll broaden out a little bit into a conversation and some questions for John. So Erik, thank you. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it very much. And thank you for inviting me onto this panel. Thanks also to John for his informative report. It was really very interesting to hear, and thanks for distilling down really the great strengths the Midwest has. I also want to just add a nod to the Brookings Institute for the report they issued, which of course led to the bill that introduced the U.S. Endless Frontiers Act, and certainly not least Wisconsin's very own Mike Gallagher, U.S. Congressman representative, for co-sponsoring the bill. Very, very proud to have a Wisconsin representative as part of the introduction of that bill. Let me start with, I've now been at WARF for 4 years, came out of Seattle. Certainly, I grew up in Fargo, but spent most of my professional career out on the West Coast. And as over the 4 years, we've shaped a lot of WARF's activities working with the university and around the region. And we are shaping WARF to become or be a local foundation with very strong regional partnerships, but with a global reach. And that really runs the gamut of the opportunities that we hope to help support. And when I first got to Madison, what I saw was enormous opportunity and potential, not just of Madison, but the greater region and certainly this magnificent state. But I kept hearing a couple negatives, and one was simply that Madison is too small to be able to boom. And also I heard that there was this insurmountable wall between Madison and pretty much everything in the rest of the state, but most importantly, Madison to Milwaukee. And I call bunk on all of that. And I have taken my time to learn more about it and put things into motion at WARF that we're all proud of, but it's only a start. Let me say also, I'm enormously optimistic of the opportunities that we have, certainly at Madison, of this grand university of the state and of the region, and some of the things that have been set into motion since over my tenure, but not because of me, but because of, in part, the chancellor, who set into motion a new computer science school at the university, which is long overdue, but they've moved boldly and very swiftly in shaping something very large. I'm watching the campus embrace relationships with industry. In WARF alone, we've included representatives from Rockwell onto my board to embrace closer relationships. Also, I'm watching a broader set of very, very large multidisciplinary programs being set into motion and large grants being awarded, even during these very mysterious COVID times. Many of these are focused on the new bio-industrialization that I think will set course for this state and our country in a really magnificent way, harnessing the strengths of the state, from the farmers to the infrastructure, the supply chain, the manufacturing, and harnessing those strengths to do everything from replacing petrochemicals to having renewed clean energy, to support life and biosciences. It's really, I'm truly excited with what is happening and the momentum that's occurring. WARF itself is trying to put its assets to work across de-risking technologies and life sciences, but also setting up a venture fund and actively engaging in setting up additional venture funds, not just in the region, but nationally. We care nationally because we want their money and their intelligence to look into our state to find opportunities to invest. And so we're trying to build relationships and a network to help support all of us here. Certainly some of that is playing out. We're seeing some venture funds, one notably very, very large fund closer to the West Coast, who came to town and in very short order, within one day, essentially tapped into the leaders within and around Madison and had a conversation and expressed a great interest in moving some of their portfolio companies to our region, not just because of Madison, but because of Madison to Milwaukee and up and down the lake, because it's that strength of collaboration, the strength of critical mass of STEM educated individuals, and the university structure that goes well beyond Madison, but this entire University of Wisconsin system, as well as the medical college and other great private and public colleges in this state. So I know the Brookings Institute noted fairly strongly that if monies are deployed to help local areas throughout the Midwest, it should be concentrated into particular cities. And I called to question that a little, or a lot. I say that because, sure, Madison is producing a lot of great technologies because of this flagship university, but it is only strong because of the strength of this grand state. And the relationships that I'm watching bud between Madison up through Green Bay and Titletown Tech, the Fox River Valley, into Milwaukee, down to Kenosha and Racine, it really is a very, very powerful region. And then you add in the Eau Claires and the La Crosses, and to their own right, they have strengths that we need to tap. So it's, I guess my message here is I came to WARF expecting to help this university, and I'm feeling very proud in trying to help this entire state, and notably this very strong region that has so much potential. As long as we work together, we're fair with each other. And what exists here, I never experienced on the coast, is the camaraderie and openness for each other to share deal flow, to share what's happening. There's not a lot of secrets, and I hope it remains that same, because that sets us apart from just about anybody else that I've experienced. Tom, you coined this term IQ corridor. I think it's a wonderful term. I agree. Minneapolis through Madison, Milwaukee. Let's not forget Green Bay down just down the lake. Certainly that cuts through Eau Claire and down into Chicago. So it's really a wonderful corridor to speak of. Let me close with, I strongly believe that we collectively have a goal of more. I think our goal of more is more innovation, more prosperous society. We want more sustainable products that we can all be proud of, and we certainly want more inclusivity within our communities and our state. And with that as a guiding light, I really am looking forward to the next certainly 4 years and many more after that as we grow together.
Thank you, Erik, and you're certainly right. I mean, this is a state of mid-sized cities that have all kinds of strengths that contribute to everything. So let me turn to Ruben here. John in his presentation outlined some serious challenges. There are some very segregated cities in not only Wisconsin, but in other parts of the region. And it dates back to a time, maybe some of the internal migrations began in the 1930s and beyond. So how do we broaden this out so that everybody wins? Oh, we need to unmute you. Thank you, Ruben.
There we go. So, Tom, first, I'd like to thank you all for having me on the meeting today. Erik and I have done these types of panels before in the past. John, thank you for establishing a great context for a discussion today. And so, as you talked about, John, the resources and the talent is here in this great state and in the region. The question is, will we use everybody? And the question is, will we use innovation to move us forward? And my conversation today, I've looking at the economy through the lens of what we need to do today, and looking at how we have been impacted by, multiple pandemics and social justice, but also a real pandemic that is really hurting our economy. And so for the most part of my discussion today, I'm focusing on, how we can recover, given the conditions that we face today in society. So rather than focusing on my social justice piece, for the most part, I'm focusing on my urban and regional planning background, just to kind of make some suggestions for the conversation, but then social justice can come up, as well. So for the Midwest to spark the U.S. economy, it will require new approaches and new understandings. I would like to discuss 4 brief areas. First, we must free our minds of the traditional economic order and structure if we want to move forward. As second, we must be prepared to respond to a rapidly changing economy. Third, we must make use of technology to eliminate global boundaries. And last, we must break the glass ceiling to really make progress. And so freeing our minds of traditional and economic structure. When we think about like businesses, a lot of folks think about brick and mortar. But in this new economy, brick and mortar is too rigid. And so, we have to really think about, how we can think about businesses in this economy beyond just brick and mortar that the people see on a day-to-day basis. If we look across our nation, we see empty malls, we see dead economic activity, we see dead space. How do we transform, how we do things in this region so that we can get beyond this? We have to be stronger, a stronger economy than just face-to-face transaction. When face-to-face transactions happen or cease to happen in our economy seems to halt. We've got to change. The businesses that will shape the future national economy will be flexible and can quickly reshape themselves after interruptions such as biological and ecological things happen. We have to build an economy that better accommodates businesses without walls, taking advantage of online connections and just-in-time delivery systems that bypass brick and mortar and go directly to customers, similar to what Amazon is doing in some instances. Knowing how to effectively operate virtually must become a standard part of our education and our industrial operation. The second point that I want to make, to spark the U.S. economy, we must be able to respond rapidly to a changing economy. Industries of the future must be able to turn on a dime and change to meet shifting markets. Similar to what we saw with GE, the auto industry, the breweries, and others, we got to be able to change. They changed, they shifted to make PPE such as masks, hand sanitizers, ventilators, but they were able to shift is the point that I want to make. The economy of the future must figure out how to bring the means of productions back to America in an affordable way. We got to start making something again so that we are not so hyper dependent on goods and services from other places. For the future success, business must have continuity of operation plans, and they must be able to adjust the ways that they deliver products and services. For example, can a business shift to curbside? Can they shift to drive-through to recognize what we need to do? Can they shift to online delivery? And so, these are some of the flexibilities that we have to have in businesses today. And then the other thing that we have to come to grips with is the fact that many businesses are going away and they're not coming back because of this brief interruption in our economy. Third, to shape the endless frontier, we must master technology and eliminate global economic boundaries. We need to be able to sell to markets across the globe. We must recognize and embrace the fact that virtual interactions are here to stay. They're here to stay. And they will be a prominent tool for business transactions all over the world. We can't have an economy that is crippled when we can't do face-to-face interactions. If we are going to lead, we must ensure that the next generation of students can perform efficiently and competently in a rapidly evolving economy that may be dependent on a virtual economy from time to time, almost 100% virtual economy. If we can't play in this space, we're going to get left behind. And so lastly, I want to say that we have to break glass ceilings, and this is the social justice part. We must begin to develop and use all of our human labor. We're not using enough people, right? We're excluding people from opportunities. We're creating barriers, and there's barriers to access to opportunities. We must change that. We must change the boardroom, and we must change executive positions and have more women and more people of color, you know, to serve in these capacities. We don't get change until change happens at the top. And so if we really want to change, you know, this economy and be inclusive, we have to make changes there. The other thing that we have to recognize is that diversity is a strength, and that it gives companies a competitive edge in urban markets and global markets all across the world. We must ensure that essential workers are given, you know, an adequate salary, that they're given compensation that really gives them a sustainable wage. And we must honor the fact that they're doing the hazardous work to keep this economy going. And finally, the region must make a greater financial commitment to educating brown and Black youth, opposed to locking them up. So that's the context that I want to set. And so if you want to talk about social justice, we can talk about that. But I think that, you know, we have to look at this economy today through the lens of what is facing us today, these dual pandemics. And I'll stop there.
All right. Well, thank you, Ruben. I think social justice could probably cover another hour. But let me turn here to John. I mean, you heard from Erik about how he moved here from the Seattle area. He called bunk on a couple of things that were sort of myths about.
And I wanted to respond. I actually agree with Erik. I think, and I was encouraging my colleagues at Brookings, if you're going to have another round of kind of university hubbed innovation funding, you know, it would be best if it could be figured so that you help implicate the universities, the regional universities, and the other, you know, I mean, the hub and spoke approach, where somehow grow some new activity, you know, in those communities where those regional universities are one of their few, you know, main fulcrums for economic activity, and they're getting killed. You know, the public universities in Michigan and, you know, Wisconsin are at tremendous risk, and we've got to kind of spread the wealth, so to speak, out from the major, you know, big research university hothouses like Madison and Ann Arbor to reach more people and places. If we can't, it can be done effectively. So that's something I agree with Erik, certainly.
Very good. Let me get to a question.
Can I add a comment there?
Yeah, sure.
That is another argument for looking at this more regionally than from a city perspective. Picking up on Ruben's comment that we have to be able to shift pretty promptly to be able to accommodate whether new technologies or being more inclusive of populations. We can only do that when you have multiple cities playing together, because no single city can be everything to everybody, nor can it modify itself, nor should it, because each city brings a complement to the rest. And so whatever Madison brings certainly is complemented by the strengths of Milwaukee. The insurgence of new ideas in tech in Kenosha and Racine, we have yet to see its potential really play out. And certainly we know the strength of Green Bay and through Fox Valley. So picking up on what Ruben was saying, we can embrace more people and more parts of our culture to be more inclusive. But each of us, if we operate as a collective, can be more responsive to ever evolving technologies and societal needs. So I fundamentally believe a regional approach is so fundamentally important.
Oh, absolutely. And
to Ruben's point, if Ruben's making the same point, you know, we were seeing this inexorable, drive to a few economic, global city hothouses, and pandemic and the attention for how do we stitch people into the economy may have reversed that, at least for a while, that we're going to have a network economy. And that means we've got to network communities and people together so that you can play and participate in what is going to be, as Ruben described, a sort of a virtually networked economy that everybody can participate in if we think of it that way and make it work that way.
Yeah. Hey, John, can I challenge you on the this whole thing about we solved the brain drain problem in the region? Because I don't think we have. For brown and black people, we still have that brain drain problem, all across this region, where we can't keep enough folks here because they're going to Atlanta They're going to other places because they're locked out of opportunities or they don't get the advancement that they have. So with the work that we do at the Urban League, we find that still to be problematic for brown and black young people.
And I didn't mean to suggest we'd solved it. I was just saying for 40 years, we were losing all these educated people across the board. And now that's turned around so that we're gaining a few more than we're losing each year for the last decade. But I think you make a good point. If you're not feeling welcomed or that the community is not one that is providing opportunity and acceptance, you're going to go somewhere else where you can feel accepted. And that may be particularly challenging given that we've got pretty harsh, strictly enforced racism in our communities that's sharper segregation than any place else.
Yeah, the trend lines are reversing. Our own research shows that as well. So let me get to some questions here. Can any of you talk a little bit? Did you read any of the recent article in The Economist on the potential of the Midwest? And so anybody who looked at that, perhaps John did?
Look at Adam Roberts, the reporter.
Yeah.
He basically was channeling the Vital Midwest report, and I've been happy to kind of steer him to stories and storylines around the region. So he captured much of what we're trying to help the rest of the world understand. On the upside, amazing innovation and economic activity, and our unique economic and political clout is also the reality that there's so many communities and so many places that are thriving or were before the pandemic in a different changed economy, to underscoring the intense segregation, which cripples our ability to work together in our major metropolitan communities. And race defines our politics and our inability to do things like in Detroit's case, we don't have regional transportation system because of counties that don't want to extend transportation to people of color, and that's wrong. And it's embarrassing, but it's also destructive because people can't get to the jobs, and it doesn't help us grow our economy or our reputation.
Indeed. Here's another question about, and this kind of is in particular to Erik. How do WARF and WISIS interact?
WARF and WISIS are very good friends. WISIS is housed physically within WARF's offices. And just as I have been preaching the regional strength, the strength of the University of Wisconsin is the system. It is not just Madison, nor is it just Milwaukee. It is 13 grand universities in conjunction with the other schools and colleges throughout the state, and there's many, which produce phenomenally well-educated students that really I believe on the most part, want to stay in Wisconsin and participate in this growing economy and innovative environment. WISIS attends to the comprehensive schools, 11 throughout the state, each of whom I've come to appreciate have their respective strengths. Parkside, for example, computer science and some engineering activities. We have Whitewater, River Falls, and Eau Claire. There are magnificent schools, and they have their strengths, and they serve a local constituency, but also the state. Arjun Sangha, who's the CEO, I would put up against any technology transfer head in the country. He's a magnificent person, wonderful, wonderful guy. And he is serving his constituents within those schools the way that those constituents need to be attended to. That is, he's focusing largely on the undergraduate population, helping them to speak science to the general public, helping them to pitch ideas as entrepreneurs. And then he's supporting those schools and they're making grants for scientific discoveries and new innovations. He and I, with our respective staffs, are regularly looking at our technologies to see if we can find complementary technologies such that if we spin them out and we can use our venture funds, we can create a new company in Green Bay, or we can create a new company down in over in Eau Claire or down in Parkside. So it's we are very, very, very fortunate in Wisconsin to have WISIS and particularly Arjun at the helm of it.
Yeah, a good stat is that a recent study showed that WISIS, if you combined all of those 11 institutions, was #2 in the nation among small, the small university size. So that's pretty impressive. A reminder to everybody, we can go a few minutes extra. If you have questions, feel free to get those up and through the chat function here. So,
Tom, if you don't have a question coming in, I would launch one out there to kind of see a reaction from the audience. So here's the thing. So if we want to be, the best region there needs to be, we've got to do better in some areas. Wealth building is important, for making us this type of region that we want to be. And if we look at affordable home ownership in Wisconsin, across the nation, it's 48% for African Americans, but in Wisconsin, it's only 23%. We're the third worst in the nation. So for us to be the best region in the country, we got to do something about inequities like that. How do we make headway that way? Most of the wealth that people get in this country on an individual basis comes because they get equity in their homes. They can start businesses, they have a retirement, and all those other things. So how will we make progress in those areas to kind of make this the strongest region to have the national impacts that we expect to have?
yeah, and I think, Ruben, you anticipated the question that just came in, which was, how do you attract more people of color? And certainly that housing stat is a big part of it. So as we think about this, this is another question that came in. If there's one thing that do help move the ball forward, per se, that you can think of, based on some of the things you've heard today, based on your work elsewhere, what would that be?
Is that directed to me?
That's directed to everybody. Kind of what are the, if you had to pick one or two things that would help move the ball forward and make this a stronger region and help us contribute to the national recovery, what would that be? And I think part of it, could be the Endless Frontier Act itself, because it's going to reinvest.
So,
Yeah, I don't know how satisfactory this answer is, Tom, because it is less concrete. I mean, when you're at WARF, a lot of people get a hold of me and say, geez, you got a lot of money, give us more money, or put more of that money to work. I get those questions, and I understand them, and I appreciate them. To me, one of the fantastic strengths of this state, and particularly I would say Madison, and now most notably I've come to appreciate those parties who are playing on kind of the southeastern corner, because we're having regular conversations. To me, it's communication, it's openness. And that is, people can pick up the phone and call me. I can pick up the phone and call just about anybody. And it's not just because of who I am at WARF. It's truly a receptive group of people that want to have a conversation about how we collectively move this forward. And life is so much more enjoyable the bigger the conversation is with more voices. And that is from different people within our society, whether it's people of color or people who are new to the state, certainly immigrants that come to our state and region and choose to live here. It's that open communication and willingness to collaborate that is just really inspiring to me. And we are able to accomplish more at WARF with the help of our friends and colleagues around the region and the state. So I would just ask, the number one thing we can do is keep the dialogue going, keep open, and nobody has a dumb idea. Every idea is worth exploring, and then we collectively talk about it. Somebody is going to make it an opportunity.
And quickly, just two things. One, the Fed did got to put more money into the kind of R&D that the Frontier Act says, because we will win and do that work. But we as states have got to reanimate a commitment to make higher education, accessible, affordable, and support, our strongest asset, as I said, economic asset, is our colleges and universities. States have been walking away from support of them, making them be out of reach. And those institutions, they can, like Georgia Tech's an example, they can commit to graduate everybody. They're students of color, their students who are poor at the same rates as the white majority. So, you know, the institutions can work for everybody. We have to make it possible for people to get to them, to feel welcomed in them, and to be able to pay for them. And that's, you know, our strongest asset in this Midwest, and we're killing it because we're not willing to spend any money of business taxes, personal taxes. We've cut taxes, you know, when paying for education is the most powerful thing we can do.
I agree with John. You know, our most valuable asset are our children, right? You know, and we have to break the school to prison pipeline, and we got to make the investment to break that. We got to come to grips with being ready to spend more money to help kids get educated than spending money to put them in prison. And Wisconsin and other places, although we do well generally, we don't do well by, you know, brown and black boys. We're willing to invest more money in incarceration and locking them up than we are in putting money into educating them and getting them into careers and colleges. And we have to not just talk a good game about doing that. We have to show evidence that we're going to make public and private investments and making sure that we are breaking down that school to prison pipeline and giving these young people an opportunity to be great.
This is a question, and we got time for a couple more here. Ross DeBall from Milken Institute, the last I knew of it, asked if we don't, and this probably starts with Erik, if we don't want to use city-focused university innovation as a means to drive clusters in the endless frontiers, what metrics would you use to evaluate regional network applications?
It's precisely the right question, and I don't have a great answer for that one yet. I think to a degree we'll all have a different view on that, whether it's inclusivity, whether it's new businesses, whether it's harnessing the strengths that already exist, such as how do we repurpose, for example, farms to the infrastructure to manufacturing. Certainly jobs is there, external investment into the region and the state. There's all sorts of metrics that are important. Which ones are the critical ones? I don't pretend to have the right answer to that, but it is exactly the right question to ask.
Mm-hmm. And it's an ideal state to maybe test that out because of the strength of those mid-sized cities around the state and the different clusters that they represent and expertise. We talked a little bit about computational science, and you mentioned, Erik, what was going on to UW-Madison with the bolstering of the computer science school there, which is excellent. There was a question about why can't we do more regionally in terms of cooperation in building a data science network that extends beyond different cities. Obviously, the Milwaukee School of Engineering, the UW-Milwaukee, Marquette are great examples of what's going on in the Milwaukee area. And this question embodied that, you know, there are some examples around the country. So thoughts from any of you on that?
I think the state does a good job in geographic systems and building those networks across the state. You know, so in the engineering space, we're making progress in that area. They've shown that you can use smart mapping to run our traffic systems throughout the state and our planning throughout the state. So if we're looking for a best practice, we ought to be looking at civil engineering and how we manage networks, highway networks, and travel networks across the state. I think the region is strong in having those networks available.
Yeah, and spoken by somebody who has a lot of expertise in transportation over time. Another question, and perhaps to close, and we'll move into some final words about things. But we talked a lot about universities. We didn't talk much, if at all, about technical colleges. Wisconsin has a really strong network there. 16 tech college districts. I think about close to 50 different campuses, and people are learning more about the trades. And if you look at our education sort of makeup, we have a lot of people with associate's degrees. what about that in terms of fitting that in?
And you know, the region invented the community college, and also has a rich landscape of non-research university colleges, technical institutes. All of them are important. They train and prepare people to do the jobs that exist today. I think the focus on research universities in particular is important when we're talking about innovation and where does the next idea, technology, or new business or new sector, you know, come from that puts, you know, those in industry. And so that's what you get from, you know, kind of interplay of applied research and development of whole new technologies and ideas that, you know, we didn't have before that can put other people to work.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
No, I agree. I think we can become, and we do be enamored with the grand research enterprises, certainly of Milwaukee and of Madison, and the well-known from medical college to the rest of the system. But the technical schools are so critically important to making sure that the majority of our population is educated, and even more importantly, re-educated as technologies take over jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and new industries begin to take hold. The bioinnovation, bioindustrialization side of things will require all new mindsets and job sets. So absolutely important, the technical colleges for the trades up through some engineering expertise that they provide people. So,
yeah. I think the community colleges are vital because sometimes people don't have the opportunity to do a four-year college. I think, as Erik brought up, the trades are essential. For some of those trades, you don't have to go to college. You can actually learn on the job. But there's a lot of emerging industries like exact sciences too, where a lot of the people there, you know, don't have to necessarily go to college. They have to be able to come and learn on the job. And those are providing great sustainable wage jobs as well.
Right.
Hospitals are the same way. There's some jobs in hospitals that, you know, people just have to get access to those jobs to be able to get access to those sustainable wages. But
Mm-hmm.
community colleges are important.
And tech colleges, they often have the ability to respond quickly to produce for the training around jobs that may not exist today. And there may be a lot of new jobs that are out there as we move ahead. So I think we've got to close this portion of the presentation. Sam or John, if you can move it ahead into that closing slide.
Let me see.
Yeah.
I have the slideshow. Okay.
As John's looking for that, I want to offer some thanks here. Janan Yasseri Moe and Kevin Walters from WARF. Great job in terms of being a part of this. Karen Timberlake and John Zordani from Michael Best Strategies, Tom Lujak from UW-Milwaukee, and our own Tammy Ehrman from the Tech Council. And remember, this is part of a series. The next piece will be September 16th. During that, we're going to get more into the nitty-gritty of the Endless Frontier Act itself. We're going to hear from Congressman Gallagher, and his Democratic counterpart is the lead co-sponsor in the House of Representatives. That's Ro Khanna, who represents the Silicon Valley area in California. So that will be September 16th. At the same time, 11 o'clock, you can register through WARF. And thanks again to our panelists for a great job today outlining the opportunities and the challenges. So thanks so much. And if you're in Wisconsin, remember today's primary election day if you haven't voted already. So thanks all, and we'll see you next time. Thanks,
Tom. Thanks, Erik.
Thank you. Yeah.